Today I want to talk about how to learn a song kind of effectively. So how to go about learning a song in the right way, like doing things in the right order, combining your skills, making sure that you're not kind of running too fast, trying to do too much at the same time, which is something that I've found that students often do. The reason why I want to do this is because students often struggle, and they always have done, with learning songs. And of course, it tends to be the one thing that people really want to do when they learn to play any instrument, right? You want to be able to actually do something with it, make some music, with all of these skills that you're learning. But it often tends to be the kind of hardest thing to be able to put everything together to actually play some music. And one thing that, two things that people do typically to learn a song is look up a tab. Now, with the internet, there are zillions of tabs you can find, chord charts you can find on songs, and also look up a YouTube video. All right, so both of those things are definitely valuable. But what I've found that tends to happen is that when you're looking up a tab, often it's been put together by, someone who's not a guitar teacher, someone who's just kind of like you, really figuring it out. A, it may not be right, and B, might be a little confusing. So you might just have a bunch of chords written over some words, and you're not really sure where they're supposed to go, or how many times you play each chord, or whether there's a strumming pattern or anything like that. So they can be quite confusing. And with YouTube videos, again, there's some great YouTube videos and some great YouTube channels around, but often they don't kind of break things down for you. They kind of assume that you know a lot more than perhaps you do. So they might say, well, here are the chords, this is the strumming pattern, this is how you play it, right? And then, often people will be like, well, I can't get it to sound like it sounds like on the YouTube video, I must be doing something wrong. And of course, they don't know what it is that they're doing wrong. And it's usually just because people are trying to kind of do too much too soon and not follow the method that I'm about, or a similar method to the method that I'm about to show you. So yeah, it's the kind of strumming, I guess, and the chord changes at the same time that tends to present challenges. And before I started teaching the G4 method, I used to use this process with quite a lot of success. In fact, I still do with the small number of students that I teach. I often go through this process. And this is something, although I'm going to pitch this today really at Junior 2 and Senior 1 students, this is something that you can do no matter what level you're at, because there's always going to be new chords to learn, right? You never complete your guitar chords. There's always a new voicing to learn, or a new way of playing. And the same with strumming and rhythm techniques. There's all kinds of different things you can do there. So this strategy is going to be useful whatever level you're at. All right. Now, what is also now really powerful about this strategy that I'm about to show you is that if you've been following the G4 method, if you are following the G4 method and you're practicing your skills correctly, this process shouldn't be too daunting, because with every chord that you learn in the G4 method, you'll see there is a kind of step-by-step way for you to practice the chords, practice putting your fingers down in different orders, and there's the instructions there are quite specific. Do this exercise 10 times a day. Do this exercise for a minute a day. And I suspect that probably a lot of students skip these exercises because, let's face it, they're not the most exciting thing. They can be quite boring and monotonous. But what I will say is that the students who do, they end up being able to get really good at those chords a lot quicker than the students who don't, right? So pre-G4, when I was just doing my own thing and, trying to find ways of working for this stuff, it would often take students several months to get to grips just with the open chords. And since we've been using the G4 method, I've seen students do this in a matter of weeks, the ones who are following those actual procedures. So they do work, right? They're not just in there to annoy you. They're in there to kind of help you progress at a much faster rate if you follow those instructions. All right, so what I'm going to do now then is talk you through my process. So step one, let's say you want to learn, I'm going to use the song Brown Eyed Girl today, right? Because it's a song that I've done millions of times with lots of students. I've got very good at teaching it. I've got lots of resources on teaching it. But this isn't about me teaching you to play Brown Eyed Girl. This is about me teaching you to play any song. So I'm just using this song as an example. And the first step really when you want to learn to play any song is to make sure that you know the chords. It seems obvious, right? It seems like a really obvious thing to say, but you know, you're gonna look the song up. So if I let me bring this up here, I'm just going to share this now. If I share on my screen, Brown Eyed Girl, yeah. So we've got 4 chords in this song, and for anyone who's being pedantic, yes, there are slightly different ways of playing it. You could play a D7 instead of a D major, for example. And also in this example, we're using slightly simpler versions of these 3 chords, which aren't that dissimilar to the ones that we do in the junior 1 level, actually. But for today, we're going to use the main chords, right? So all we need to play Brown Eyed Girl is 4 chords, okay? And if you're doing senior level 1 or junior level 2, these 4 chords are included in that. And there's a very good reason why we start with these chords. And it's because, and I did a Facebook Live on this a couple of months ago, it's because there are hundreds of songs, if not thousands, that use these chords because they're in the same key, right? They're in the same musical key, which means that they sound good together. So another reason why we start with those chords, you know, it's to really give you the maximum number of songs that you can start playing as soon as you want to, really. So first of all, you've got to look at each of these chords and you've got to make sure that you really, really learn them, right? Before you start trying to put them together, before you start trying to do any kind of strumming pattern, all right, you shouldn't even really be looking at the song sheet at this point. You should just be looking at it thinking, right, what chords do I need to know? So in this case, we've got these 4 chords: G major, C major, D major, and E minor. Okay, so we're going to stop that there. Now, a quick note about if there are any chords that you see in the song that you want to learn, and maybe you don't know that chord, or it's a bit of a it's a name that you don't recognize. So for example, for students who start learning kind of beginner level songs, very often you'll get a B minor bar chord, right? And the B minor bar chord tends to come up because it's also in the key of G. So if you're playing songs in the key of G, they don't all include it, but some of them will. And bar chords, if you know them, and if you've been through that process of learning them, they're not easy. So what I would suggest not to do there is not try and delay your learning by attempting to learn that full chord first, right? It's also the same with the F chord as well. Sometimes we get the F major chord coming up in songs that we're trying to learn. Now, there are kind of cheats. What I would recommend here is if there's one chord that, like every other chord is fine, but there's one chord that you're not really sure about, ask one of us, ask me or Mike or Jimmy, and we should be able to give you a little cheat, a little kind of simpler version of that chord just to get you started and just so you can play that song, right? So one chord is fine. If you're looking at a song and it's got lots and lots of chords that you don't know, the chances are that's going to take you a lot longer to learn. And what I would suggest in that case is put it on the back burner for now, put it on your ultimate song list, right? And then, you know, maybe again, come to one of us and say, look, what level do I need to be at before I can start playing this song? And then we'll be able to let you know, yeah, okay, you know, you'll be able to do this when you get to senior 3 or senior 4, just so you've got an idea of when you're going to be able to start learning the song. But what I wouldn't recommend is to try and struggle through a bunch of new chords that you're not really ready for yet, just in order to play this one song. All right. So yeah, really learn those chords. That's step number one. Step number two is what you're going to do next is you're going to look at the order that the chords come in, and you're going to break them down into little pairs, right? So that you're just going to start practicing the individual changes of those chords. So again, we're not actually doing anything with playing the actual song yet. Let me share my screen again here. Here we go. So here we've got two sections in Brown Eyed Girl. This is pretty much the whole song. This is why it's such a good song to learn if you're a beginner, right? So the verse is just a repeated 4-bar section here, G to C, back to G again, and then to D again. And then we play the whole thing 4 times, right? So we're basically looping this section here. And that's our verse for Brown Eyed Girl. So the first thing that I would recommend that you do here, right, is write down all of the individual chord changes that you're going to need to be able to do in order to play this song effectively. So G to C is your first change, right? So G to C would be the first 2 chords that you'll change, that you'll practice changing between, and I'll give you some more tips on doing that in a minute. Then back to G again. Well, that's basically the same change, just in the opposite order, so that's okay because you've already practiced that. Then we go G to D. Oops. Yeah, so G to D is going to be the second chord change that you write down. Okay, now in this case, because we're looping this 4 times, we're then going to go back to G here, and it's okay because it's the same. Again, it's going to be the same chord change that we did here. But you also want to be looking if the chord at the beginning of the progression, and it's a repeated progression, is different, is a different change to any of the ones that you've done before, then you need to factor that in as well. So, for example, if this was, say, an E minor here, well, we won't have already covered that change yet. So we want to then practice D to E minor here. All right. Then we go on and look at our bridge. And again, we're also looking at the changes between the sections. Even though we're going to practice these sections individually initially, we also want to be looking at the changes between the sections, because that's another problem I've seen students have. They can play one part, they can play the next part, but they haven't kind of got them together yet. So then look, we've got a D coming out of the verse and then a C going into the bridge. So D to C is going to be our, I think, third change, okay? And then C to D, we've not done that yet either. So C to D is going to be our fourth. D to G, we've done already. G to E minor, we won't have done because we're introducing this new chord now here, the E minor chord, right? So that's going to be our next change. And then E minor to C, I believe, yeah, and everything else we've got already. So I think there's like 6 different combinations of chord changes that we're doing there. This is, again, it's a bit technical, but it's a really useful way of breaking these songs down and making sure that you're learning all of the component parts, right? So how would we do this? So what I recommend doing then is taking each of those chord changes that you've written down. So the first one is going to be G to C. All right. Now, again, if you've been following the G4 method, you probably won't have to do much of this because a lot of this is already covered in the method, you know, getting your fingers down in the right place, practicing, putting them down in different orders and all that stuff. So depending on, you know, how many songs you've learned before, you might actually be quite comfortable with these chord changes. This is, you know, really if these are chords that are relatively new to you and you haven't done much with them there. So what you're going to do, set your timer for 1 minute, and all you're going to do is just practice changing for 1 minute without doing anything else. You're going to strum, but you know, you're not going to put any strumming patterns or anything like that. Just strum, and then take your time, make sure I'm playing the chord correctly. Take your time getting to the chord. All right, so don't rush it, because the important thing here is about building up our muscle memory, right? So you're going to take your time getting to the chord. Try and keep your fingers as close to the neck as you can, close to the fretboard as you can. All right, and you're just going to do this for a minute. Not worrying about speed, but worrying more about accuracy, right? And then when that minute's up, you're then going to do another minute on your next change. So what did I say here? I think we had like 5 or 6 chord change combinations to do. So you can do 5 or 6 minutes, a minute a day on each of those chords, right? Now, if you do this consistently, you're probably not going to need to do it for very long, maybe a week, maybe even just two or 3 days, you know, especially if you've already been following a lot of the instructions about how to practice these chords, right? So that's the first, step number 2. Step number 3 is you're going to repeat that. So you're going to keep practicing those same changes, but this time you're going to do it to a metronome, or even, as I prefer to do, some kind of drum track, because it makes it sound a little bit more interesting and exciting. And I know Mike and Jimmy have talked in previous sessions about different apps and stuff you can use for drum tracks, but to be honest, just go on YouTube, type in drum track, and whatever BPM. I normally recommend starting at around 50 or 60 BPM. Keep it nice and slow. Even if the song that you're learning is a lot faster than that, it's very, very, very important that we start learning it slowly first, right? So the next thing we're going to do is then, with a drum track or a metronome, or in my case, what I've actually got here is a drum, kind of like a practice track with the chords on it as well. We have got a few of these are from back in the old days. There we go. Yeah, so where we've actually put together chord changes where you can hear the chords changing, and all you want to do really at this point is just have like 4 clicks going, or like a 1-bar drum track, and you're just going to strum on beat number 1, which then gives you the time to change, to form the chord and change it. So I'm going to give you a quick blast of this drum track here. Share my screen again. Oops. There we go. So just rewind that actually. Hang on. There we go. Get the lead count in. So it's just these 2 chords over and over again for 1 minute, just backwards and forwards. Yeah, you get the idea. Cool. So again, you're going to do that for each of those chords, right? For each of those chord change combinations. So G to C, G to D, C to E minor, whatever it was, all those different combinations there. And again, the only difference is that you're now practicing your timing as well, right? So you're not just practicing in your own time, you're now trying to change these chords in time along to a metronome or drum track, okay? So step 4, once you've got a little bit more comfortable with these changes, is you're then going to break the song down into its component parts, or into its sections. So we're going to start now to have a go at playing the actual song, but we're not going to try and play the whole thing from start to finish at the original speed with the strumming pattern. Remember, we're still just building this up now. So if I bring my PDF back up again, share my screen, here we go. So now you can see we've only actually got 2 sections here. We've got the verse, which is this repeated 4 times section. This is this simple version, by the way. I know that in the original song there's like one other little bit that kind of happens, but this is the version that I've been using with beginners for a long time. And then we've got the bridge section. So what I would do now is I would do that same exercise, right? But now you're going to play the chords through in the order that they're written here, all right? So you're going to go G, 2, 3, 4, C, 2, 3, 4, G, 2, 3, 4, D, 2, 3, 4, and then we repeat that, yeah? 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, D, right? So now we're starting to sound a little bit more like the song, albeit a very, very simple, slowed down version of the song. And then we're going to do the same thing with the bridge section. Now this is, you only play it once, but it's 8 bars long, so it's twice as long as the verse, but you only play it once. So this time you're going to go C, 2, 3, 4, and D, 2, 3, 4, G, 2, 3, 4, E minor, 2, 3, 4, and C, 2, 3, 4, D, 2, 3, 4, G, 2, 3, 4, D, right? That's your bridge section. And of course, you want to be doing all of these things multiple times, right? Don't just kind of play it once and then think, right, that's it, I'm done for the day. The more you do this, the better you're going to get at both the changing of the chords and also playing in time as well. Okay, so the next thing you want to do, this is all part of step 4, all right? The next thing you want to do then is a lot like at the same metronome speed. You don't want to start increasing the speed just yet, but at the same metronome speed, you want to start increasing the number of strums that you're playing. And I think Jimmy talked a little bit. In fact, this was what inspired me to do this week, because I watched Jimmy's little mini lesson on chord changes that he did at the end of last week's Facebook Live. And it was a very similar thing, actually, where you leave the metronome nice and slow, but you start gradually increasing the number of strums that you're doing. So, and really, I should have had a metronome on while I was doing that. Let me put it on now. Okay, so here's my metronome, 60 BPM. All right. So this time I'm going to strum on beats 1 and 2, right, rather than just beat 1. So I'm going 1, 2. Then I do my change. 1, 2. Right. I do my change. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. And that's just giving you're allowing yourself a bit of time there for your fingers to make the change. And then when you become comfortable with that, you gradually add a third strum in. Yeah. So 1, 2, 3, and change. 1, 2, 3, and change. 1, 2, 3, and change. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. And of course, the idea is that you want to get to the point where you can strum on all 4 beats of the song to the metronome, changing the chords nice and smoothly without missing a beat or having to kind of pause so you can get your fingers in place. So eventually, we want to be doing this. 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And again. So that's kind of like, if we can get to that point, we're doing really, really, really well, because the rest of it then is then if there's a strumming pattern, you then want to practice the strumming pattern, but again, you want to do it slowly first. So the brown-eyed girl strumming pattern is this very familiar one that everybody learns. I think it's in, I'm pretty sure it's in Senior 1, maybe Senior 2. Okay, but again, you're probably going to find if you start immediately trying to use that strum pattern at the original speed of the song, because it's quite a fast song, you're going to struggle. So what you actually want to start doing then is just practicing. And again, if you've been doing your rhythm exercises, you should already know this strumming pattern anyway, right? Because it's one of the real kind of bog standard beginner strumming patterns that everybody generally learns within their first few months of playing. So hopefully this should be pretty straightforward. Then you start in instead of just doing down strums, you then try and bring in that strum pattern. It's actually quite hard to do slowly, right? So now, hopefully, it's starting to sound a bit more like the song, because we've worked on our chord changes, we've worked on playing along to the metronome, just strumming on one bar, we've worked on increasing our strums, and then we've brought that strumming pattern in, all right? And then step 6, which is my final step, is then, of course, you want to, at that point, you want to start building the song up to its original tempo, okay? Because, you know, many songs are a lot faster than you're going to be able to learn them at initially. This is a good example. It's actually quite a fast song, even though the chords and the strumming pattern are fairly straightforward. It's the speed of it that tends to flummox most people. So if you get that stuff down slowly first, then you'll be able to start gradually. And I'm, you know, imagine this as a montage in an American film where I've done all my hard work. I don't know what speed. Yeah, so Brown Eyed Girl, something like this. I think this is like 144, maybe not. I'm guessing, but okay. But there's a bit of work there in between, you know, being able to do that at 60 or 40 or 50 or whatever you start at, and then bringing it up to its full tempo. But hopefully you can see there from that process that I use that you start off just breaking the chords down, and obviously at that point it doesn't really sound like anything because you're just practicing the skills. But then, you know, we get to the point where you can it starts to sound like the song that it's supposed to be, right? Now, with everything, guys, this is a long game. This is a process. I wish I could tell you that it's simpler. It's not. That's why so many people quit, because they try and take all these shortcuts. And these skills that I've just been through, yeah, it can be a little monotonous, can be a little boring. But in the long run, if you do them just for a week or two, you know, you'll find that you'll learn and get to grips with these chords much quicker than if you struggle and try and do everything all together too soon and everything too quickly. Okay. Now, just before I go, there's one kind of bonus skill that I want to talk about. This is for people who want to sing and play guitar at the same time. And I know we have quite a few students who do that, and quite a few students who would like to do that. And people often ask me, like, oh, can you, like, what do I need to do to be able to sing and play it at the same time? So what I would say to that is that you need to go through that process first, right? You need to get really comfortable with playing the guitar part first, to the point where it's on autopilot. Because if you're singing as well, the chances are the melodies maybe going to have a slightly different rhythm. You know, there might be times when you're playing the guitar but not singing, or vice versa. So as well as your left and right hand, right, you're also got to think about your singing and when that's all going to come into it. And if you're still concentrating on what either of your hands are doing, you know, you're really focusing on getting that strumming pattern right, or you're struggling to change to one of the chords, then you're not going to be able to even attempt to sing over the top, because it needs to be something that just gets done on autopilot first. So for those of you that want to sing, for those of you that you know, like to accompany yourself, learn the guitar part first. Get really comfortable with the guitar part. I think Jimmy said something like, you know, if you can play it and have a conversation with someone at the same time. I think that was something he said in his video last week, right? If you can kind of play that chord progression and have a chat with someone at the same time, then that shows you that you're kind of ready then to have a go at the singing, because then you're going to be able to concentrate on singing, pitching the right notes, getting the right rhythm, and the guitar playing's kind of already taken care of. So that is my 6-step, 7 bonus if you're a singer process for learning songs. I hope you found it useful. To sum up, I just want to say, do use guitar tabs. They're fine. Just be a little careful about where you're getting them from and who's been putting them up, because they're not always accurate. Yep, but follow the same steps, right? Follow those steps that I've just been through. Even if you're using a good guitar tab, follow those steps for sure. All right. And then the second thing as well is do use YouTube videos too, because again, there are some great YouTube channels out there. I think they're an awesome kind of complementary resource really for any lessons that you're having. And you know, if you're confused about any of this stuff, or if you're not sure about any of this stuff, don't forget, you can always chat to any of us about it. You know, we're always happy to help. We've probably between us heard most things that students get you know, stuck with when it comes to this stuff. So, you know, we'll be able to give you some advice.